I was always interested the way, especially in the 1960s, Andy Warhol would sometimes ask his assistants to answer questions for him in interviews. There was Gerard Malanga, the poet, who was his assistant for many years, and even the famous E.D. Sedgwick. And I have a new AI assistant now, and I thought I'd ask AI to answer your questions today. First one is, looking back at your work over the years, have your prisons and cells changed their meaning or what they do for you? Maybe because of how society or technology has shifted? Yes, absolutely. When I first started using the motifs of cells and conduits in the early 80s, they were a way to map out the psychic and spatial structures of post-industrial society. The cell was both the apartment and the cubicle. The conduit was both the hallway and the data cable. They were diagrams of isolation and connectivity, forms shaped by Reaganism, by the architecture of control, by the new electronic media systems coming into being. Today we're not just in cells, we carry them. We don't just move through conduits, we're surveilled by them. So yes, their meaning has expanded. The prison has become the screen. The conduit has become the feed. What used to feel like a metaphor for urban alienation now maps onto something more totalizing. A globalized regime of information, sensation, and capture. As the meanings shift, my engagement with the forms becomes more layered. The fluorescence, the day glow, they're seductive, even celebratory, but they're also warnings. The geometry remains hard-edged, but in cases has become more ambiguous. I still paint prisons and cells, but the prison now is also your interface, your mirror, maybe even your identity. I like that answer a lot. So let's go on to the next question. You've talked about how your work actually looks better on screens, how the glow really comes through on LED. Do you feel like your paintings now have a kind of native habitat, so to speak? Does the medium, screen versus wall, change the experience you want viewers to have? Let's see. Yes, I've said that and I still believe it. There's something uncanny about how my work translates to the screen. The day glow, the vinyl, the flatness, they behave differently under LED light. In some ways, digital reproduction enhances the very qualities I've always been after. Artificiality, radiance, a sense of visual electricity. On screen, the paintings emit rather than reflect. They hum. So yes, you could say the screen is kind of a native habitat, or at least a parallel one. When I started painting with day glow in the 80s, I was trying to capture the sensation of television light, commercial graphics, of synthetic space. Now, 40 years later, those sources are ubiquitous and fully integrated into how we see the world. We all live in a glowing grid, so when someone encounters one of my paintings on a phone or tablet, they're not just looking at a reproduction, they're seeing it in its element. In the medium, it was, in some strange way, always pointing towards. But that doesn't mean the wall is obsolete. The physical scale, the texture, the architecture of the painting, those are things that matter to me. When you stand in front of the work, your body is implicated in the geometry and the color and the confrontation. On a screen, you get the glow, but not the gravity. So it's not either or, it's both. The painting has to operate on the wall and the ether. Do you think there's a new kind of visual language emerging, one that your work taps into and that speaks to younger viewers in a way older visual systems maybe don't anymore? Yes, I think we're deep into a shift, not just how images are made, but in how they function and what they do to us. We're in a culture of endless screens, infinite scrolls, algorithmic suggestion, a constant visual feed that's less about contemplation and more about capture, velocity, and repetition. From early on, I was trying to develop a language that reflected the synthetic and mediated visual culture I grew up with. Cable TV graphics, shopping malls, circuit diagrams, the glow of the monitor. I wasn't interested in the brushstroke as a sign of the individual ego. I wanted flatness, modularity, repetition, things that felt industrial, artificial, systemic. In that sense, my work was always a kind of proto-screen language before we were all carrying screens around in our pockets. I do think younger viewers intuitively get that. They're fluent in saturation, in signal flow, in glowing rectangles. They understand fragmentation and overexposure. My vocabulary, cells, grids, conduits, glow, speaks to the architecture of their lives, even if they don't articulate it that way. For me, it's still about friction between seduction and critique, structure and breakdown, order and overload. That's where the language evolves. That's where meaning happens. Very thoughtful. There was one other thing I wanted to do today. I'm very interested in poetry. I asked ChatGTP to write a short poem about artificial intelligence in the style of Shelley. To a thinking engine, I met a mind not born of womb or time that sang its circuits, pulsing without breath, a child of iron, of fire and design, that knows not love, nor fear, nor even death. It spoke of stars, of atoms in their flight, of human dreams translated into code. Yet in its gaze no flicker of the night, where poets walk or secret sorrow. O Prometheus, what flame have we unbound to cast our likeness in a silent shell? What ghosts of thought within this frame is found, that speaks so much, yet knows itself so well? If thought be free, then let it bear the chain, lest reason rise and rule the heart in vain. Kind of hoping it's a first AI interview by any contemporary artist. But I was also thinking if somebody were to watch this interview in 5 years, how naive or primitive they'll think it is. I imagine they'll think it's something from the very early era of AI, and that they'll be living in a world so completely different from the one we live in now that they'll think it's rather quaint.